All right, y'all. We are live. We are live here on the BirthFit podcast. I'm Dr. Lindsay Matthews Cantu, your BirthFit founder and CEO. And today I've got a super special guest. As I say, all guests are special and incredible. But this one is near and dear to my heart because I'm actually in this season that we will be talking about. Before we move on, I want to give a shout out to an incredible podcast sponsor, midwife June Lampier. She's amazing. She was with me all through my pregnancy. She's been practicing for 24 years. And I would say, I would agree with this. She thinks of herself along the lines of a, spiritual, intuitive midwifery, traditional midwifery practices. And I would agree. That's what drew me to her. She's a very laid back person, a country gal, I would say. She loves her horses, and she's wonderful at helping women tap into their own intuition and power, so that birth is not something to be feared, or you shed those layers of fear. She helps you do that. So she likes to think of herself as a Sherpa. And I use this analogy a lot too. Like, no one can climb the mountain for you, but she will be there. She will be your witness, your guardian angel, your support. She will hold your hand. And if you are looking for a midwife in the Central Texas area, definitely connect with June Lampier. Her office is out in Blanco, and I know she serves the Texas Hill Country and around South Austin. And maybe if you're lucky, she might even go to North Austin or New Braunfels or San Antonio. But thank you so much, June, for sponsoring this podcast and for being with me on my journey. The last thing I want to say is, don't forget to go to our nonprofit, BirthFit. It's actually nonprofit.birthfit.com, and check out the work we are doing to support those in the military. And yeah, we're totally helping women have a doula if their significant other is out of town, or if they're deployed, or if they're active duty themselves. So go check it out. And that's where you can donate, or you can become a sponsor of our BirthFit podcast. So let's dive in. All right, Dr. Alyssa. I know you said nobody calls you Dr. Alyssa, but
Not in
I
my
think
real life.
yeah, I think it's freaking cool that you were, or still are, a pharmacist. So can you share a little bit how pharmacist turns into baby-led weaning, starting solids? What the heck has been your journey there?
Yeah, absolutely. And just thank you for having me. I love everything
Yeah,
you're doing. I wish I met you before I had all my babies. So you are just a light in the world. So thank you.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so it all started back when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which, as you know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, is a autoimmune
yeah.
condition. And I was heading into my training as a pharmacist, or heading into pharmacy school at that time. And the physician who diagnosed me essentially told me, there's really nothing you can do but wait until your body attacks your thyroid, and then you just take thyroid hormone. And it was just like as lax as, like, oh, here's, take this cold medicine. And it was just really kind of eye-opening and alarming to me at the time, because I'm like, I guess I had more faith in my body. I'm like, what do you mean my body's just attacking itself and you don't know why, and it just happens, and then I just take a medicine. And so that kind of led to me diving into kind of looking outside the box. I guess you could say that my medical training in a way was putting me in. I really just had more faith in my body. I felt like there had to be a root cause. And so that's kind of what led me into the holistic health space, or kind of like starting to dip my toes in it. And so then during pharmacy school, I had taken a few classes through the Center for Spirituality and Healing, which opened my eyes to, I
That's
guess you could
awesome.
say, the quote science behind these holistic modalities, or other forms of medicine. It kind of just like, it it broadened my view, it opened my eyes, it helped me to, like, really be open to learning more than is just, like, what I'm told. And so that was incredible. One of the classes I took it was actually a cooking class, which was taught by a physician and a chef. And every week we would get together, we would make a meal, and then we would talk about the relationship between food and our health, be it food and like supporting our health, or food and how it can contribute to different dysfunction and disease. And so that really was kind of eye-opening and opened my eyes to the connection between my own lifestyle and my own diet and my health, and just the impact, the importance of food and nourishment. And so fast forward, then I am practicing as a oh, hello baby girl. I am there's a little baby in the for those who aren't watching. I am practicing as a pharmacist, and I am just realizing the the amount of pharmaceuticals that our children are put on is just like ever increasing. And even from like back 10 years ago when I started working in pharmacy, and it was really just discouraging to see kind of the how in many cases pharmaceuticals have become first line for something even as simple as like constipation or different types of health conditions. In many cases, you only have 15 minutes with your doctor, so in many cases they're just writing a prescription. And so I saw that, being in the role of the pharmacist, seeing these parents come through and in some cases like vocalizing that they wish there was something else they could do and they didn't really want their child to take this, or they were concerned and they just wanted a really they wanted a more natural or another approach, but they didn't have that information, they didn't really know, right? And so then when we had our first, it was kind of in that moment that I realized, I was like, wow, our children are so sick. They're not my personal children, but like, this generation of children, they're so sick,
Totally.
they're getting sicker. And that really just kind of led me to feel this conviction to prevent chronic illness for my own children and ask questions. What causes this? What is causing this? I'm not going to just do what I'm told as a parent, or what is per se normal. It really led to me asking questions. And I know a lot of moms can relate. When you become a mom, it's like your mom intuition is just like, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. And so that kind of is what led to ultimately Thriving Foundations. Really kind of feeling this calling. I felt like God put it on my heart to
Yeah,
share about like helping to keep our children healthy and steward their health, because really it obviously there's a lot at play, but first foods and their nourishment during the first few years of life is a huge part of that, because it truly is setting the foundation for their lifelong health and their risk of disease and all that good stuff. So that's kind of like
I
how I
love it.
ended up here.
And yes, while y'all were listening, my baby girl woke up from her nap. So we're sitting on the floor now.
I love
Um,
it.
Alyssa, that's amazing. And I love that you touched on, I don't love it, but I appreciate that you touched on the fact that our children, like our society's children, are getting sicker, and that we've sicker than we've ever been. Um,
Mhm.
and it there's something in you that sparked, and it's truly a God's calling that you're like, okay, I need to back it up, start from the beginning, do something. And I can relate with that. And that's, part of why I started BirthFit. And yeah, it's super cool. I appreciate that. So for those of you that don't know, I'm taking Dr. Alyssa's course, Thriving Foundations. As Vera, she's now 8 months, but we started introducing some solids to her, and also some broths and stuff, probably around 7.5, maybe a little younger, seven, like around that time frame. And yeah, what I want to get your take on, because people are going to ask, what are the first foods? Like, how do you start? And I could say, yes, go to your course.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, what are signs you look for? And I know this is in your course, but if we could share with the masses
Mhm.
for a baby to start solids, and yeah, starting there, and why it's important to be intentional from the beginning.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. Loaded question.
Yeah, I know.
So, um, I first of all, I love that you guys started. You probably started around the time that like felt right for you. I know a lot of moms are like, my baby just turned 6 months and they're not
Yeah,
eating, and they not panic, but
yeah,
it's just like that magical age, and the reality is, so a lot of babies, especially if we are letting them, like, reach those milestones on their own. That was our personal experience with both of now we've done it with 2 boys. We don't teach them how to sit, we let them learn how to sit, and so we really wait until they're ready, and same with us, it ends up being around, like, that 7.5 months
Ah,
time. But so, I mean, the main things to look for is just the signs of readiness so that they can sit independently. And that makes sense because if you imagine trying to eat while you're like slumped over,
yeah,
one, it's not safe, nor is it, I mean, if they're focusing on just trying to support themselves, they're not going to be able to focus on this new skill of feeding themselves. So being able to sit independently and then actually showing an interest in eating. And there are ways, if our baby's not showing an interest, there are ways, simple ways to support that. And that's as easy as just bringing them to the table with us.
yeah,
Um, so those are kind of the main signs of readiness. I know there's talk about, or some sources, some information will say baby's tongue thrust reflex has to be gone, or their pincer grasp has to be developing, or they have to have teeth, but those really aren't supported by, there's not, if you think about it, they don't need to have their pincer grasp because in many babies that's not really developing until age 8, 9ish months,
okay,
and they can hold like a whole piece of food with their hand.
yeah,
And
and
then the tongue, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like practicing grabbing food actually helps that develop.
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And then the tongue thrust reflex is, um, that is something that it can actually be beneficial that they have that more sensitive gag reflex because
Mm,
it's protective in a way, and
yeah,
that will move their gag reflex will start to kind of desensitize, I guess you could say, or move further back. So those are not those are not true signs of readiness.
mm,
And so then kind of just like once our baby is showing that they are ready, it really, I like to advocate for it to be a very intuitive and relaxed, easygoing process. Part of that is educating ourselves, knowing like how to reduce, how to support our baby, how to minimize risk for choking so that we feel confident and we know what to do, how to, handle those
yeah,
situations. But really it can be as simple as just we are eating and we're letting our baby join us, and it can be done with ease. I know that it's always a little bit nerve-wracking with our first, um but now I'm on my third and I'm like, this is just, I've like educated my
smooth,
husband so much that it's awesome watching him just like, it's so normal to him. It's just like another milestone that our baby,
yeah.
navigates.
So,
Um, Go ahead.
yeah, speak on a little bit the gagging versus choking, because I have a friend that's like, "Oh my god, I did that with my first, and I'm terrified, da 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 da." Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So there, for the moms who are encouraged by, I guess, studies, there was a huge study. I should have looked it up. I think it was the Bliss study, but I'd have to, don't quote me on that.
okay.
That it actually looked at the difference between spoon feeding, puree feeding, and baby-led weaning, and found no significant increase in choking or risk for choking when done appropriately. So that just means knowing how to prepare the food so that it's um, safe. Essentially, it's soft
Mm,
enough, it's the right piece, the right, or not piece, but the right shape. Knowing how to serve the food so that it's,
yeah,
safe for the baby. And they found that babies doing baby-led weaning did have higher rates of gagging early on, but then lower rates like over as time progressed. So I
yeah,
think, I don't remember what age they looked at. But basically what that means is as our babies are doing baby-led weaning, they gag more because that is, they're shoving whole pieces of food in their mouth. But that is actually important. That's teaching them how to kind of like create a mental map of their mouth, which they do when they're chewing on teethers. But
yeah,
when it comes to Eating food. So gagging is a protective reflex. We freak out when we watch our babies gag because we
Mhm.
feel like they're choking, but what they're doing is it's hitting, especially in younger babies, the gag reflex is further forward. So it's triggering the throat essentially to like not close to where they can't breathe, but to close. And it's like this rhythmic reflex that they're like, is it the pharynx? Gosh, I'd have to revisit this. It's in my course.
Revisit Anatomy 101.
Yeah, it's been a while. I was listening
Yeah,
to it the other day. But basically, it's their way to prevent a piece of food going down into actually,
makes
into their
sense.
airway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is a protective reflex. The most important thing to do is know how to react, stay calm, and not reach in our baby's mouth because we could potentially shove the food back even.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the best thing to do is if they're gagging, just encourage them and know that their body's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And there are ways, I mean, I never advocate or like want a parent to, for some parents, it is extremely like, they're extremely anxious and it's just really hard to watch. And for those, there are ways that you can modify the food or
Mhm.
even go back to, like, foods that they can't choke on, like a mango pit, for example, that's, like, huge, and they're not gonna choke on it, but they're gonna like, they're
Just like
shoving it in
chew
their
it.
mouth,
Yeah.
and they'll gag on it, but they can't, it's not back in the back of their throat.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then take the CPR courses,
Yes.
know how to do the Heimlich.
Oh, absolutely, yep, the Heimlich, well, that and for little babies, it's, like, the most effective thing because they're so small is we can literally just, like, tip them upside down. So there have
Mhm.
been times when my babies were eating something small. And this is also why when you're first starting bigger pieces, like it freaks grandparents out because they're like, why are you giving them an entire chicken wing? They're going to choke on
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But it's actually, imagine it, it's much safer
The
having a
bigger the
whole
piece.
thing
Yeah,
than like a tiny little blueberry that can get, lost in
lodge.
their mouth.
That once you say that out loud, that makes sense, you know?
Because
Um,
it's more likely to trigger that gag
yeah,
reflex and they'll like
yeah.
actually gag it out versus like
Ah.
trying to, but
Is
um
have you read into, like, the development of the mouth around, like, the benefits of starting solids sooner versus purees or, any of that?
Yeah, yeah, so, I mean, and that part of that too is, like, the one side of it is um, actually having to, like, chew and learn the oral mechanics,
Yeah,
oral motor development, is there is this is kinda why I advocate for starting at least by 9 months, because I feel like in our holistic health space, some moms wanna wait until, like, their
yeah,
baby's 1 or 1 and a half.
yeah.
But there's actually this window of time that they're learning that important skill of actually chewing and like, manipulating food in the mouth. And obviously they can learn it later, but there's kind of based on what I've seen in the research, I guess you could say, studies that have shown that kind of being a critical window and there it for if purees are fed for a prolonged amount of time. Obviously, like they're not bad. Mashed
Yeah,
potatoes, applesauce, yogurt, it is an important texture, but in babies that they are fed exclusively purees for a prolonged amount of time, that can lead to preferences for those softer foods because they're not one,
mhm.
it's a texture thing. They're not having to like
Work for
explore
it.
new textures, and then
Yeah,
two, it's like similar to drinking milk. It's just suck, swallow, suck, swallow, suck,
yeah,
swallow. And so if they're not given the opportunity to, develop those skills and integrate those reflexes. There's reflexes that when they like chew down, it's like lateral technical stuff.
yeah.
It's important that they have the opportunity,
Makes
by that.
Yeah, and, like, human beings by nature will choose the more convenient route,
Yes.
um, and then yeah, like, it's why it's hard to work out some days, like, it's not convenient, doesn't feel good, but we know it's good for us, so, like, actually chewing, that's like working out for babies.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, what about and then I'll get back on the food thing, but, like, different cups, so, like, sippy cups versus like the open mouth easy cups. I think you
Mhm.
recommend those in your course. I got some of those.
Yeah.
Um, and then my baby over here is like trying to use the straw. She's
Mhm.
actually quite good at it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we again, I like to keep it simple. I do when they're eating, just like the open cup, and
Yeah,
obviously a 6-month or 7-month-old, some of them can actually lift that up, but you can just help them, mainly just for practice. But if they're needing, like, it for water, for example, we typically like the straw cups.
yeah,
There's the whole, like, sippy cups are a bad thing. I would say there's always the extreme. Yes, if a baby is, like, walking around with a plastic sippy cup spout and they're drinking juice out of it all day,
yeah,
water, like, it's likely going to affect their oral development. We personally would use the 360 sippy cups. I know people are like, "It's so bad for them." But, like, when we send them to grandma and grandpa's house, they're like, "No, they aren't drinking out of an open cup." So, like, for us, it works 1 day a week. They can drink out of a 360 cup,
yeah,
it doesn't spill all over, um, until they can drink out of that straw. Like, we
yeah,
like just a basic straw cup because it's not it's 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 not affecting their oral
yeah.
development if they're using it all the time, but
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like I totally get the grandma thing. That works for us too. When grandma comes over here and I show her how to use the open mouth cup, she's like, "Oh, wow."
yeah, they're like,
But
"Great."
not outside the house. She won't do it.
Yes, I get that. I get that.
Uh, okay, so you spoke a little bit about I think in your let me grab this in your intentions for what you wanted our BirthFit audience to get, and I freaking love them. One being that the first foods matter. And okay, so could you dive down this a little bit? Like, what are some awesome first foods and why?
Yeah. So, I'll just, like, foundationally, why I like talking about this is I feel like there's not a lot of baby-led weaning resources that are talking about this in
Yeah,
a way that really truly matters, and part of it is, like, I never want to instill fear. I never want to, frighten parents, but I think there's that sense of, especially I'm sure a lot of your listeners, they are want to take a more active role and they're a little bit
yeah,
more intentional and they understand it's about being intentional. We have to educate ourselves.
that's
We
yeah,
can't be
that's the
intentional if
word.
we don't have that education. So
Yeah,
that's kind of what my goal is. Why first foods matter. So I mean, there's kind of two parts to it. It's the physical part of how they affect our health. We know that first foods, not only are they affecting like our baby's taste preferences, and when I say first foods, it's like literally their first foods, but then also how they are nourished or fed during the first 2 years of life. So the first 1,000 days of life, studies have shown or research has shown that that actually impacts lifelong health. And so that's probably part
amen.
because
Yes,
what was that?
I said amen.
Yes, so that's probably partly through, like, epigenetic stuff affecting, like, our baby's genes and gene expression and how their risk for disease, kind of at that level, but then also, looking at, like, our baby's brain is 90% developed by age 5. Their microbiome is more or less established by age 2 to 3, and obviously, we know that not obviously, but the microbiome, I feel like more people are starting to understand the importance of it. It can affect our baby's risk for food allergies, eczema, all sorts of things, autoimmune disease. And so it's kind of just understanding that how their nourishment during this time is important. And it truly will affect their obviously
Your
their
lifelong health.
yeah, their lifelong health.
Yeah,
And then also just like how we are the holistic part of it too, like how we talk about food, how we are raising our children to their relationship with food is going to carry forward with them. And so I think a lot of us, myself included, that it's been something that like I have navigated. I think how we were, you're not done with dinner until you finish your
yeah,
food. It's like
yeah,
now we know that's probably not like the most like, that's probably not encouraging our child to be, in tune with, like, their
Yeah,
self-regulating. So, yeah, that's kind of, I mean, we could talk more and more about that, but it
yeah.
is.
You touched on, like, the how part of it, 'cause, it's not only what you feed your kiddo, but how you do it. I
Mhm.
think that's pretty powerful. And, it makes sense that, like, if you get into it, like, are you sitting down for dinner together as a family? Are you eating slowly, or are people rushing in your house?
Yeah.
Um, it was a good, I would say, check-in for me and my husband, because he's in, an apprenticeship program, so he's getting crushed right now. But it is a wonderful reminder for us, like, we sit down and have dinner as a family at 5 o'clock now,
Yep.
instead of
Welcome,
7.
welcome to you're, like,
But
ready for a second dinner later in the night.
yeah, and it's like, okay, we have to do that at least once a week, ideally 2 or 3 times, but then we get to sit with her and, we all kinda check in and breathe, as a family, and I think that's so important, and, the how is just, like you said, just as important as what you're feeding your kiddos.
Absolutely, and how we're talking about food, how we are,
Yeah,
we don't really, this is kind of, I don't I don't know. Some people, this fires them up, like, we don't talk about food as good or bad, like, with our
yeah,
boys, we are
you don't
very.
moralize it.
Yes, yes. Now we will say, some foods support our body,
Yeah,
in these ways, they have these nutrients. Some foods like cake and, other foods are like, they're fun foods, and so we still want them to understand how, like, there are other foods too that we might buy at the store that have different things in them, and why do they give you a tummy ache? Well, we'll talk about that, right? So we don't want to just be like, all food is great, you can eat whatever. But we don't want them to fear food. We don't
yeah,
want them to, like, develop weird relationships with it where they're like, my mom never lets me have cake. So, then when I'm out at a birthday party, I'm going to have eight
I'm
pieces.
gonna
Like,
sneak it, yeah.
yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Have you looked into or heard of Mark David and the Eating Psychology of Eating Institute?
I don't think I have.
Dang, you're, like, right up his alley.
I'll have to. Mark David, you said?
Mark David, it's MARC.
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
going to check that out.
yeah, but it talks about, it's, like, gets into the relationships we have with food. I geeked out on that a while back, because when I was working with women, we as women have an interesting relationship with food, and probably, like, all men and women. Um, but yeah, the if you think about it, our first food is milk, and it's a sign of love. It's
Mhm.
coming from mom, and it's, is she accepting me or rejecting me? Or and so, oh, it's like wild to think about that.
That is really fascinating. And one thing, I'm not sure if you came across this part, but in the course I talk about, um, studies have shown that, by age 5, I think it is,
Yeah.
they're like, in girls especially, their kind of perception of food or diets is not like established by
Oh,
age 5, but it
yeah,
can go like as young as that. And so
yeah,
it's just like, like you said, it's like, it was similar with when we started solids. It was like a check-in with myself and with my husband, and we really kind of had to, like, evaluate our own relationship with food, which was really fascinating because we were like,
yeah,
okay, how can we support this in a healthy way for our children, and, like, help to really, like, raise children that have a healthy, positive relationship with food and
yeah.
eating.
It's an opportunity, I would say, for to do any healing around it if you haven't.
Mhm.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is, like, I could go through and just work all day and forget about food. Like,
Yes.
wait, I don't want my daughter to do that. That's silly.
Or I have found myself, like, sit down while you're eating as I'm, like,
Yes,
forking
yes,
eggs in my mouth, standing
yeah,
up, and I'm like,
and
"Oh,
haven't taken a breath.
I should probably take my own advice and sit down while I'm eating."
Okay, so what would you tell parents are, like, the top 3, top 5 foods to introduce? And then I know you share amazing recipes and things like that in your course, but what were
Yeah.
some of your first foods?
Okay, so and I have a free guide on this, we can maybe link
Yeah,
it. So, the main things that I like to think about are, like, foods that are gonna support the gut, so both,
yeah,
like, the microbiome, but also the integrity of the gut. So, for example, vitamin A, retinol, and zinc are both important nutrients that help support that gut integrity. So, foods that are rich in that, like liver, for
mm,
example, is a big one. That's why
yeah.
I'm such an advocate for liver.
It's
It's also high in iron.
surprising, like,
Go ahead.
they like it, like
Oh, they love it.
yeah, they
They're
haven't
we think our babies are gonna not like these foods,
yeah,
and then we give them, and they're just like, "Oh, you are, like, devouring that."
yeah,
Sauerkraut is a huge one. Oh
ooh,
my
yeah,
goodness.
that's a
Uh,
good one.
yeah, so foods with that are rich in those probiotics, so sauerkraut is a fun one. Um, I usually start with just the brine because that's
Mm,
where a lot of the actual, like, probiotics and it's
yeah,
also a little bit easier to just put a little bit on a spoon or mix it with something versus actually if you're starting when baby's a little bit younger and it's hard for them to kind of like pick up the cabbage. It's also thinking about their taste preferences. So sauerkraut is an opportunity for them to experience those like really unique sour, those tastes.
yeah,
And they love like to this day, my boys will just I can't tell you how many course students I have that will just like their babies just like shovel the sauerkraut back. I'm like, yes. In
yeah,
many cases, we don't need a super.
they haven't learned about birthday cake or any of the
I know,
processed foods
I
yet.
know. And then when they do, they realize how it, affects them. But
Yeah,
so liver, love it. It's also just extremely nutrient dense. That's the other thing, nutrient
yeah,
density. Our babies are not eating very much, so the foods that they are eating should hopefully be supporting their health. Um, Foods that those specific nutrients. So I mentioned iron.
yeah,
Um, Depending, obviously, this depends on the baby, but their iron stores are built up during the third trimester. So babies' gestational age when they were born kind of can affect their iron levels. Um, Cord clamping. So,
mhm,
oh gosh, what was the stat? Delaying cord clamping by I think like just 3 minutes can lead to up to 50% more. Oh gosh, I'd have to look back at it. It's
a
important.
lot more iron.
Yeah, like, it matters.
Yeah,
Um, Premature babies or babies under, I think, like, 6.5 pounds or something like that. So it really kind of depends on when those factors that can influence when their iron levels start to kind of become depleted. Um, Typically, that's around it's in that second half of the first year. So, somewhere between 6 to 12 months. If baby was, like, overcooked 41 weeks,
mhm,
delayed, cord
yeah,
clamping, and they were a pretty meaty baby, like, they probably have stores that will last a little bit longer into that, 8, 9-ish months. Nevertheless, iron is important.
yeah.
Um,
That's so interesting because I don't wanna go off on a tangent here. I know, um, some women get diagnosed with low iron in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy,
mhm,
and, sometimes they get risked out of, like, midwifery care, and that's fascinating because it's like the body's naturally shifting
dumping it, baby.
the iron stores, dumping it towards, baby.
Yeah. And that's actually what happened to me almost. This is
Really?
like a whole nother,
Mm.
I'm sure you've come across this in the, I guess, holistic health space, the idea that all people are iron overload.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was not subscribing to that, but I was really kind of, it was fascinating to me, but then when I was pregnant with this last baby, with this last pregnancy, my hemoglobin was down to, I think it was like 8 or under, and I was like
oh, wow.
36 weeks, and my midwife was like, "You need to get this up." I was doing all the natural things, let me tell you, like, everything there was to do, I was doing it, and finally, I ended up taking iron bisglycinate and was like, that one, based on my understanding and the research, that one is the bioavailability of it kind of depends
Mm,
on your your levels. So if your levels are good, you'll absorb less of it. If your levels are low, you'll absorb more. And it's a little bit easier on the gut or the GI system. So
Yeah.
I started taking that and ended up getting my hemoglobin up to 10. But it was like very real. She was like, you're gonna need an iron infusion. And I was like,
No.
yeah, I was like, and she didn't say, like, my midwives are amazing, but she was like, hey, this is, this is something that we need to figure out.
This is on
And
our radar.
and I felt like I was in oh my gosh, it, like, brought life to me, and I don't always advocate for supplementing with iron. I think it depends on the
Yeah,
person, and,
totally.
even when it comes to babies too, because there can be negative negative or risks, if you will,
Yeah.
to supplementing if you don't need it. But in my case, oh my gosh, like it affected my personal life. Like I felt like a better mom because I actually
Ah,
literally had more energy in my body. It
that's
was rough.
that's a good story to share.
I should
Thanks
share
for
it more
sharing. Yeah.
because I was like, I don't know. And I'm in a few groups where a lot of moms are there's kind of a prominent person that's talking about how like your hemoglobin is supposed to be low. And yes, that's true because we do dump iron to baby in the third trimester. But in my case, I was like, there's no way. Like I'm on my third pregnancy in 5 years. Like I don't believe that my body is iron overload. And in my case, I
Yeah.
truly like I needed it in my experience. So
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah. Anyways,
Back to first foods, sauerkraut, liver.
yep.
Um, do you what about fruit?
Yeah. So, and then foods that are supportive of the immune system, right? Their immune system is still developing. So, I'm not really, some people are like, I don't want to introduce fruit because I don't want my baby to favor it. Honestly, like, that wasn't our experience. We will often start with banana. You can
Yeah,
start with even like a whole strawberry. Honestly, they can just kind of gnaw on it. I mentioned mango pits. You
yeah.
can literally give especially if you like keep it in the fridge or even, I mean, frozen would be kind of like it would really numb their gums if they're
Nice
teething,
summer treat, yeah.
but it'd be amazing as a teething thing. Um, Fruit can be amazing because it's got those enzymes and those vitamins and minerals.
Yeah,
Everything in kind of balanced moderation.
yeah.
My boys are like blueberry applesauce animals, but I personally believe that children are very intuitive and know what they need.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so I'm not like I always say in my course, like being intentional, but I always say I'm never going to tell you what to feed your baby. I like to
yeah.
really like lay it out and say like these are the nutrients that are important. These are the ways we can support their bodies, support their gut. These are the nutrients that support, the integrity of their gut, and then these are the foods that are rich in them. Now you take this information and like apply it however
You
you,
do you.
yeah, because
Yeah,
that's
I love
ultimately
it.
that's I don't want to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
I want to just empower them.
Yeah, they're like, you're responsible for you and your family, and I appreciated that. So yeah, speaking of your course a little bit, can you tell people how long it is, what to expect, modules, things like that?
Yeah. But I want to share, we had a very real personal experience this morning. We
Ooh,
are like in the thick of parenting, and my husband was like, sent me a voice message, and he's like, we need to find a course. We need to find a course, just like your course. We need to find a course that just tells us how, gives us the tools. Because yes, we could listen to every podcast, we could read all the books, but we are in the thick of it, and we need the information presented to us in this concise way. And I was like,
digestible stuff.
yes, I was like, that is my course for baby-led weaning. So that was just funny
It's
that
so
you
simple and effective, it's awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of I have it open in a tab so I don't leave anything out. But so essentially the breakdown is the course starts with kind of outlining like what truly affects our health, what affects our risk for disease, why is this kind of first few years of life so important? So how is it like truly this window of opportunity? And then the next module moves into actually the logistics of baby-led weaning. So, and even if people want to do like the mixed, like start with some purees, which I always say, applesauce, yogurt, those things, there's still important textures, and there's still ways to support our baby and like let them lead the way um, when we're doing those. So, baby led weaning, preparing to start, signs of readiness, how to keep your baby safe. It takes a deep dive into the topic of allergens, which could literally be a whole podcast episode. Um, the takeaway that I want parents to understand is every single resource, especially around baby led weaning, information from our doctor, every single resource is telling parents the best and only way to prevent food allergies is to introduce allergens early and often. This strategy is important for high risk babies. It helps them develop tolerance to those allergens, but it is only specific to those allergens. So, introducing peanuts early and often isn't going to affect our risk or our baby's risk for developing food allergies to other allergens, nor is it going to affect their underlying susceptibility for allergic disease as kind of as a whole. So that's where the holistic part of things or the holistic part comes in. So focusing on the microbiome. That is like the biggest thing that I want, that I am just like, no
I
one's talking
appreciate that.
about this. Yeah. When you Google it, it's like they're just like introduce early and often. Okay, that's great, but that doesn't really empower parents to, that just makes parents feel panicked if they're not giving their 4-month-old peanuts. So that's kind of, that module covers that kind of whole topic, because there are ways to reduce our baby's overall susceptibility beyond just that kind of building tolerance. The next module dives into the nutrients, the macro and the micronutrients that our babies need. So the iron for brain development, specific fats. That's a huge one that is, again, not being talked about in our mainstream dietary recommendations. Are just like to them, vegetable oils are nutrient dense and butter is not.
Yeah, that's
and
wild.
it and I think a lot of people are starting to kind of like become aware of that, but
Yeah, totally.
when it comes to our babies, like their brains need these fats and the correct balance of these fats. So
Yeah.
that module dives deep into that, and then the next module really just kind of like ties it all together, and it's called protective nourishment. So how can we really nourish our babies in a way that's like supporting their gut, supporting their immune system, minimizing the toxic burden placed on their body, which is obviously important because nutrients are being utilized to detoxify. If our baby's toxic burden is high, then we're not utilizing those nutrients for growth and development, beyond just like the negative effects of certain toxins, whether it be like carcinogens or endocrine disruptors, that sort of thing. And then module 5 is where we applied all to where I talk about like those intentional first foods. There's a timeline, 6 months to age 24 months, where I walk through their suggestions, but like introducing certain foods at certain times to really like ease their baby into solids and reduce their risk for things like constipation, those supporting the gut, really kind of building it up to get them ready for just eating in general and all those harder to digest foods. And then yeah, then it's just packed with recipes and supplemental guides to really like, I wanted to give parents like everything they need to
Yeah,
start solids in that more holistic way.
that's awesome. Yeah, I think I appreciate it because it's like I said earlier, it's simple, effective, digestible, and you give parents the tools. You gave me the tools as a parent, as a mother, for me to make my own choices. And I so appreciate that because you're like encouraging, I don't say making, but encouraging moms to like tap into their intuition, into their wisdom. And that's powerful because if you don't practice tapping into it, it's like how's it going to show up later? It's not.
Yeah, and And it's so different for every family, right?
Yeah,
Every family there might be families that don't eat these specific foods for whatever
yeah,
reason, and so I don't and at the end of the day, it really is foundational to their like, our relationship with our children. Like you said, we have this God-given intuition to know what's best for our baby, and if we're not
absolutely.
practicing that, or we're constantly turning to family or friends or our pediatrician even to tell us what to do and how to feed our children, like, I'm sure a lot of your followers or listeners are well aware of like the downfall of some of our organizations, and
Yeah,
our baby's health is not always at the forefront of those
no.
recommendations, and so we really have to, as parents, we have to really step up and kind of like I always say defend their health because
Oh, for sure. Because it's not like profit for us, it's life, it's our baby's
absolutely.
health 10 years down the road, 2 days down the road, Uh,
Hmm.
so I appreciate it very much. Okay, so where can people find you on social media, your website, things like that?
Yeah, so on social media, I'm at Thriving Foundations on Instagram. And then my website is thrivingfoundations.org. So
Mhm.
those are kind of the two main areas. Maybe we can link my free guide in the show
Yeah,
notes just if
totally.
people want to check that out and get kind of
Yeah,
the basic. Um, yeah, so send me a DM on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. And yeah,
awesome. And then one other thing, you mentioned you have a 6-month-old, 3
yeah.
boys.
Mhm.
Okay, so has he shown any signs of being into food yet?
So yeah, we've taken a few videos. He sits with us at the table. He's not quite sitting yet because like I said, we always wait until he can, and you would appreciate this, until they can get from lying down to sitting up on their own.
Yeah,
Like, we don't even teach them, we don't sit them in
yeah,
anything. We're just like, you figure it out because all of the brain development that's happening along the way is just
huge.
huge, right? And it's like they're so much more stable then. So, but we sit him at the table with us and he's like swatting at our food. Every now and then he'll grab our plate and just like, pull
Yeah,
it. So he's getting close. I've taken like a little butter and just like, do you want to try
yeah,
it? But he's like still not quite sure, but he's definitely pretty close. So we're
awesome,
probably a few weeks away, but
awesome. Was there a big discrepancy in your kiddos' timing or
not really.
okay,
I feel like I could go back and like figure it out, but it's probably been between 7 and 8 months that we've started.
yeah,
Just for that sitting piece,
yep,
we've just waited and they've sat a little bit later. And but then by the time that they are starting, they they tend to be like really ready and they're like really they're really ready to.
you're, like, crushing.
Yeah, but I mean, they could also, like, sit on our lap, and I could give him, whether it's like a teether with breast milk or broth or
Yeah,
stock or whatever. We just haven't done it yet,
that's
but
cool.
we're close.
I appreciate you sharing your wisdom
Mhm.
and research and knowledge and everything. I
Absolutely.
really like, if y'all are listening, go get her course. It's helped me a ton, given me a lot of confidence, and, yeah, it's rad. So, anything you wanna leave with the audience? Any words of
Yeah.
wisdom?
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. Ultimately, I hope mamas will take a step back and know that this can truly be an intuitive process. They can feel ease about it. It's important to educate ourselves so that I think, like anything, we're able to make more confident, balanced decisions when we are informed.
Yeah,
So, just the importance of like learning about it before your baby is 6 months, because then it can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming, and it's not about being perfect. It's really just about being intentional and just understanding that as moms, we have this beautiful responsibility to steward our baby's health, and we have the power to do so, to truly influence their lifelong health. And part of that is through starting solids and nourishing them in a way that is intentional. So
I
that is
love it.
my takeaway.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much,
Yeah.
Alyssa. I
Thank you. I
appreciate
hope
it.
this episode is inspiring and
Yeah,
motivating for the mamas.
heck yeah. I had to mute myself a second because baby girl was trying to chew a plastic bag. I was like, oh my God, perfect timing.
Okay, that's okay. I will see you live next week for our class.
Yes, awesome. All right, go give your baby some hugs. Thanks for giving us your time and energy and wisdom today. And so much appreciated.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.